Daf. So I'm going to want to go over those first before we go weiter. Anyway. Good morning, Shmuel. Gewaltig. Okay, so I believe we got just on to the top of Amud Beis yesterday. We got just to the top of Beis Amud Beis yesterday. We learned about Chatzi and Chatzi ben Chorin. The Gemara was probing. When it says in the Mishnah, Hakoil Chayovim B'Re'iyah, what is the Hakoil? So the Gemara wanted to say it's referring to an Eved, Shechatzi Eved, the Chatzi ben Chorin. And that happens when there's two masters, two partners in an Eved, and the one of them frees his part. So this Eved now half belongs to himself, half belongs to the Eved. And we said that the Mishnah Rishoina had a machlokes between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. So Beis Hillel said it's a status quo that you could remain that way, and the Eved will work one day for his other master who did not free him, and every other day he's a free man. He could work for himself. And Beis Shammai says, no, you can't allow that because he's not going to be able to be Mekayim Periyur V'Revir. So because of that, we forced the Adain to free the other half of this Eved. Of course, the Eved has to write an IOU note so that he could pay for the value that we forced the Adain to relinquish. And he's a free man. Rashi says a massive chiddush that Moti actually pointed out. Rashi says that the moment he's a Chatzi Eved, Chatzi ben Chorin, he's already chayiv. He's already chayiv to be on the regular, even though right now he's only a Chatzi Eved, Chatzi ben Chorin. He's still an Eved. Because since we're going to force the Adain to free the Eved, we give him the status as if he's already free, and even before he's actually freed, before they do the paperwork, this person is mechuyev in aliyah l'regel. That's what Rashi says, and that's what Mati pointed out. The other thing we pointed out, Rashi points out, is that there's a stira minei ubei in the Mishnah, because Hakoil Chayovim B'Re'iyah at this point in the Gemara we're saying tells us that a Chatzi Eved, Chatzi ben Chorin, is mechuyev in Re'iyah. But later on, when the Mishnah says V'avodim she'enim shechorim and Ravinas V'dayik, avodim that aren't free at all, but if an Eved is a half Eved, half ben Chorin, he will be potter from aliyah regel. So it's a direct stira. So to answer that direct stira, Rashi says something that's very, very fascinating. And Rashi says again in the last four lines here of Rashi, he says as follows: Sefer de Masnisi, the Katoni Chutz min ha'avodim she'enim shechrorim, the Ukimna, the Ukma Ravina, the Mishachatz Eved, the Chatz ben Chorin, the Potter. The second clause in the Mishnah that we're medayik is telling us that a Chatz Eved, Chatz ben Chorin is Potter. That is a contradiction to the first line of the Mishnah of the Koil. Nevertheless, tells Rashi, Mishnish Kodim Shechosu B'Sil. That line of the Mishnah was written by the Tana before. It wasn't written, it was orally given over. That was before we decided that we're going to free the other half. We're going to force the Adam to free the other half. Then you have the Akoil, Lasuye Chasiev, Chasiev B'Chorin. So it almost sounds like the Mishnah was originally written without the Hakoil Chayovim B'Re'iyah. It was written according to the Mishnah Rishoina that Chatzi Eved, Chatzi ben Chorin is going to be potter from Re'iyah. And then the Mishnah, then after the Gemara went with the Mishnah Achrayna, or after the Mishnah Achrayna came out that Beis Hillel's Moida, that they would have to free this Eved, now you have the Hakoil Chayovim B'Re'iyah to tell us that everyone's mechuyev in aliyah l'regel, which is a pretty fascinating way to understand the Mishnah. As an aside, the Baal Shem Tov says, Hakol Chayovim B'Re'iyah means everybody's chayiv when it comes to Shmiras Einayim. And the Mother Rebbe said even better, Hakol Chayovim. Every person who suffers any type of difficulty in life, no matter what it is, you can trace it all to Re'iyah. You can trace it all to Shmiras Einayim. So someone is zoichet to be very careful in Shmiras Einayim. According to the Mother Rebbe, the Mishnah is telling us he'll have no problems in life. But that's what I learned here. I also wanted to speak out that there's a very famous story with a Yid that died, and there was a woman that was like walking around town encouraging people to come to his levaya. And then this woman disappeared. No one knew who she was. And it was said over, I'm not sure who said it over, but it was said over that she was Maseches Chagiga, because this person, his whole life, harved on Maseches Chagiga. So Maseches Chagiga herself came to be Mechabed this Yid. And it's brought down in this form of commodity. This is that Rebbe Shemaisa. It's brought down that the Magid, the Malach that the Beis Yosef used to learn with, told him this, and the Beis Yosef writes in the Sefer that this Yid was Zoicha because of Maseches Chagiga, and that was in fact Maseches Chagiga that came to be Mechaber. So Chagiga is a very good opportunity for us to chaperai. Okay, so let's get back to the Chatzi Evet Chatzi Ben Chayrin. The Gemara tells us that we have to free this Chatzi Evet Chatzi Ben Chayrin. Why? Because he cannot marry a Shivcha, because Lo Yiyah Kadesh, the Jewish part of him, cannot marry a Shivcha, because he's not allowed to marry a Goy. And the Goyish part of him cannot be married by a Jewish woman, because she has a problem with Sikadesha. So because there's no choice, and to say that he should just be abstinent is not an option, because it says, so because Tikkun Olam, we force the Rav to free him. So right off the bat, there's a question. Let's say he would have been able to marry a Shifra. So would that have alleviated the problem? Let's say he could marry the Shifra. Let's say this Chatzi Evet, Chatzi B'chayrin can marry a Shifra. So that would solve the problem? Avada wouldn't, because if you think about it, if he's marrying a Shiksa, he's not Makayim Puruvu. There's a whole shaila. If someone has children, a non-Jew has children, and then the non-Jew converts, and he becomes Jewish, was he Makayim Puruvu with the children that he had before he was Jewish? And Pasha is not. He's not Makayim Puruvu. So even if this fellow did marry the Shifra, how would that solve the problem of Puruvu? So that's one of the shailas that the Chayim speak about. And they say, he wouldn't be Mekayim Puruvu, but at least he was being Mekayim, populating the world. So Taka wouldn't be the mitzvah of Puruvu, but at least it would be something, at least he's engaged in procreation, and that would have been enough that we might not have freed him. We might not have forced the other to free him because of that. Let's do these two toshis because there's a lot of kashas that come up on the sugyas as to what the problem is. So Toshis says, Lisa Shifcha Eina Yochel. He's not allowed to marry a Shifcha. Fred Toshis, I have a simple answer. The Limker Atzmai, why can't he sell himself? Why can't he make himself back an Eved by selling himself? The Limker Atzmai, Lomotze Kedei Lisa Shifcha, the Hager Eina Nimker Bevet Ivri. Hager cannot be sold anymore. Thank you very much. Because normally we know, thank you very much, Mati. Normally we know that Eved Ivri, the Odin can give him a Shivcha. So let's let this Chatzi Evet Chatzi Ben sell the second half. There'll be half Eved Ivri, half Eved Kanaini, and with that he'll be able to marry a Shivcha. The Gemara says, so Toshis, that's not a possibility. He has to be able to go back to his family after the Abdus, and he doesn't have family. Another reason is since he was not yet L'kayim Periya as a Jew, the halach is we don't give him a shivcha knainis, we don't give him every a shivcha knainis unless he was L'kayim Periya already. If he doesn't have a wife and children, Rabbi Moishel Shifcha Knainis. So that's what we learned a couple of weeks ago, the Parshas Mishpatim. And I think the Meshech Chochmah speaks out. The reason for it is we don't want someone to chas v'sholem to be schlepped down to lose his Yiddishkeit. If he has an anchor, he has a wife and children already who anchor him to Yiddishkeit, so then we could temporarily give him a Shifcha Knainis. But if we gave him a Shifcha Knainis and he didn't have a wife and children, chas v'sholem, we could pull him away forever. In Tomer Frek touches a simple solution. If he's a half an Eved, half a Mecharim, Let's find him a shidduch, just like that. Yisa bas minoi. Let him marry someone who's in the same state that he's in. Perfect. If he's half Evid, half Pescharid, and she's half Shivcha, half Pescharid, it's a perfect shidduch. When the Shachan reads the shidduch, the Shivcha will ask, "What did you see about us that you want to put us together?" Right? Dumya, similar, the Preda Shatava. If you have a mule a female mule that's looking to be mizavik, that's in heat, Einmar bin aleha loy sus v'loy chamar elamina. You are allowed to be marbia on a mule, which is a half horse, half chamar. You're allowed to be marbia, so that you see it's allowed. Prepare oisav espeda. The Shlomo zakti gemar the toises. The hosum like kapet kra ela beklayim the trei minim voleka. When it comes to kalayim, where we don't want two different breeds together, this solves the problem. A mule with a mule is exactly the same breed. Aval hacha aman kapet kra atzat cherus. What is the problem here with not marrying a shivcha? The half of the person that's cherus, there's a hakpada from the Torah, the lo lishtamish tzat cherus ba'avos. The part of this person that's cherus may not be mishamish with a woman who is an evet. And that problem we still have. When we tam the shari harba, shari gam lirkariv ala preda. Now Tosha says, once you allow a preda, a mule, to be mated, because of that, you're also allowed to ride the mule because they're linked to each other. Okay, let's go on to the next Tosha that gets back into our sugya. Lisa shivchen yochel. Correct Tosha, I have a simple solution. Umamzeres, let him marry a mamzeres. An eved is allowed to marry a mamzeres, and a ger is allowed to marry a mamzeres. So here you have a perfect solution. Let this chatzi eved chatzi b'charim marry a mamzeres, and he'll be mekayim for revu, and all the problems are solved. Why is there a need to force the adon to free his half? Zoktosis mamzeres lo yisa afal gav the eved muter b'mamzeres. You know why? Lefisha kadesh v'oimet kiditnan perak oimer. Yechoylin mamzerim litaher. A mamzer has a way. The Gemara Kedushin tells us that there's a way to get a mamzer back into Klal Yisrael. Ketzat mamzer noisei shivcha. The mamzer could marry a shivcha. B'tzat chereshari. So you see that the mamzer could marry a shivcha, or the eved could marry a mamzeres. B'tzat chereshari ba, and even the tzat cheres of this eved would also be mutter in the mamzeres. So Zoktoisus, as far as his tzad avdos, that the mamzer has a lot of marry, and as far as his tzad cheres, as a ger, he's allowed to marry a mamzeres. So why force the adon to free him? Find him a mamzeres. The shachar said, "I have the perfect shidduch for you. What's so special about her? She's a mamzeres." Ooh, that's gewaltig. Yeshloimar, and for Tosis, you can't do this. The ein lanu l'sakin k'dei laharbis mamzerim ba'olim. That's not a good takana. It's not a good takana to add mamzerim to the world that he's creating the children of mamzerim. Ba'oid, even the tafsuba kedushin. Now here Tosis comes up with an unbelievable observation. Since kedushin will be tafus in this mazeres, so she's an eshes ish when he's mekadesher. So now ozitzar avdos umishtamish beishes ish. The half of him that's an eved, that's not party to the kedushin, because an eved can't give kedushin. Only a ben chayin, a yid, can give kedushin. So the half of him that was mekadesher and made her into an eshes ish will now answer her on the other half of him, because the half of him that's an eved is like a different person, and now he's being mishamish with an esesish. Okay. What about an asin?
So it won't be a full avera. You can't say, he's over a half of Ashes-ish, and the love of Ashes-ish. You
Would he be
can't,
chayiv misa? Would he be chayiv misa? Would he be chayiv chenek al sniyuf? I don't know.
probably not.
But it's good enough of a reason why we
Only
would
half
have
of them will be Chayiv Misa.
the others are free to heal. We're talking about a mamzer, a free woman.
No, but the same thing in terms of slave. Initially, you're allowed to give them a full wife, as you said, in order to produce a slave.
Correct.
So the benefit basically is to you.
So the Odin,
The owner, yeah,
right?
that's where the benefit is.
So but what does that have to do with our shayla about mamzers?
So in terms of the whole purpose of it is to get into slave, but you can't do it in a way that you employ for others.
No, we're not talking about that anymore. This is not a help at all, because we want to suggest that the Eved should marry a completely free woman. The Odin will have absolutely no access to those children, because it's the child of a free Jewish woman.
So he's coming in with a wife.
We're talking about someone who's freed now, and he's allowed to marry mamzeres. There's nothing different, even if he never had a wife. Even if he never had a wife, he's now a single man. He's half a ben chayrin, and he's allowed to marry mamzeres.
We're not talking about people
No.
that becomes.
No longer, no, not.
So we're talking about just.
Yeah. So unesina nami lo yisa, the afal gav the mamzeres unesina v'shechrui mutarin lo v'zeh. Even though he could marry all of these, the hava hatfasus kedushin, because they would have the kedushin is typhus on them. Vositzad abdus u'mishtamish beishish. That's why it would be a problem. So all of these other solutions, mamzer and a sin, all of these people who could marry half a evet, half a ben chayrin, all have the problem of the half of them that's an evet will be mishamish with relations. Inami nesina asur b'sad abdus, or maybe not, the nesina is even asur the sad abdus. The lav kadosh v'amaru, they're not allowed to be mekadosh. So now Toshus asks a very simple question. In time of Toshus, the lesser I say the lashevis yitzara, the litchel lav lo yekadosh. Why don't you say the regular rule of a seder chalosis? There's an essay to procreate, to increase people in the world, and the reason why he cannot marry a shivcha knainis is because lo yekadosh. But let us say b'doichet chalosis. The Shlomo Zaktois is the hacha efshel l'kayim shneim. Here, when do you say asay dechalois aseh? That's only if you can't find another way to get around it to avoid being over the loisaseh. However, the hacha after l'kaim shneima de kviya, therefore we don't use the heter of asay dechalois. So what's an example of asay dechalois where there's no way around it? If the makam hamila, if the erva, the makam erva, the child has a nega on it. So there's an issur to cut off the nega, but there's no possible way to be mekayim the mitzvah of mila without cutting off the erva. But here you have a simple solution. And therefore, we don't invoke a seder chalosis. Inami, I say the dochilosis elakalain mila b'taras the beidno de me'eker lav mekayim asay. The idno de me'eker lav mekayim asay. The only time you say seder chalosis is if they both occur simultaneously. Aval hacha nishas hara over labelav. At the chalas bia, before there's enough of a bia to actually procreate, the isser already is at the beginning of the bia. The assay lekat gemar bia, but the assay of procreation will not be until the gemar bia. So the assay and the loisha are not occurring at the same time. So we learn two rules in Tosfos. A is you don't say seder chaloisa if you have another way around, and B is you don't say seder chaloisa unless they're both occurring at the same time. The question here is. The question over here is, if you say asay dechaloisaseh, let me think a second. You say asay dechaloisaseh, there's another problem over here. How could you free an eved? Isn't there an isser to free an eved? Right? It says in the pasuk, and there's halacha that you're not allowed to free an eved. That there's use knossos that are given if someone frees an eved. So why is the option of freeing an eved such a good thing? there's a problem. So actually, that's Tosfos Kasha in the next Tosfos. So we'll get to that in a second. So let's see what Tosfos says over here in the next Tosfos. This rabbi, I feel Shmuel Damar Mafkar Abda Yochel Lecheres. Oh no, I'm sorry, that's a different question. That's a different question. So let's focus on this question in a second. Why is it that we're going to tell someone to do an Isser and we're going to tell them to free the Eved? So there's different shalos in the Rishonim. So some Rishonim say that we have a problem over here. It's our best option, but there's a Ramban that says a Moedik Chiddush. There was a story that we learned. I don't remember which Masechta. The Olam will remind me, but we had a story about Rabbi Lazar who came into the Beis Medrash, and there was no minyan. So what he did was he freed his Eved so that his Eved was able to be mashal the minyan. So the question is, how is he able to do that? You're not allowed to free an Eved. And you can't say to Soida Chaloshisa because he's freeing the Eved and then only then they're davening. So how does that work? So the Ramban says a very big chiddush over there. And the Ramban said the whole Isser not to free an Eved is only if you're doing it for no good reason. But if there's a good reason, there's no Isser at all. So it's not just to say the reason is Doichel. No. The whole Isser is only for no reason at all. But whenever there's a reason why someone's doing it, there's no problem of freeing an Eved. So therefore, in our sugi, it's very poshut. There's a good reason why we would want the Adon to free the Eved, and that's why that's the prescribed solution. Okay, so that takes us to the end of the sugya, and now we're up to Chutz Mecher Shoyte V'Katan. So we're going to learn all about a Cher Shoyte V'Katan, that's potter from mitzvahs. Katanim we learned Cheresh Dumya the Shoyte V'Katan. If a Cheresh is potter from mitzvahs, it must be a Cheresh that has similar characteristics to a Shoyte V'Katan. And what are those? Ma Shoyte V'Katan, the Lav B'nei Deya, just like a Shoyte V'Katan who don't have seichel, they don't have proper comprehension of the world. Av Cheresh the Lav B'nei. It has to be the type of Cheresh that doesn't know what's going on. The Kamash Malon, and it teaches us the same thing that we learned in the Mishnah. Keditnan. Cheresh Shedibru Chachamim B'chol Makom, the Cheresh that the Chachamim talk about, that they consider him a shoyta. Rashi says, the cherish that the Torah says is part of mitzvahs. That's the type of cherish that can nor hear nor speak. So that really disables him from comprehension, from understanding and learning things. That's what the Rabbanan know. The lav b'nei deya. In those days, they didn't have the aids that we have. So, what if the Cheresh was able to speak, he just couldn't hear? Or if he was able to hear, but he just couldn't speak? So the Allah is chayiv, he'll be chayiv, and Rashi says, so Tosfos is saying, how could he speak if he cannot hear? So Tosfos says it started off he was able to hear, and that's how he learned to speak. And then after he learned to speak, then he became deaf again. But we know that as things progressed, Helen Keller was blind and mute, but she was able to speak, I believe. Right? She was blind and deaf, not mute, and she was able to speak. So the Chamakam Sheina Shemei and Deber Hamadaber ben Shemei, Shemei ben Deber Chayim. Zog to Gemara Vati. Tanina Laha the Tanur Rabbanan. We learned the Brisa that also supports this halacha, and it says as follows: Hamadaber ben Shemei Zeu Cheresh, Shemei ben Medaber Zeu Ilay. Someone who can speak but not hear is called deaf. Someone who can hear but not speak is called mute. The Zev is Zev is Zev, but both of these people are regular people who are b'chliv mitzvahs. They're regular healthy people. Lagabe evi halacha, which is consistent with our Mishnah that we're saying as well that a cheresh is only part of a mitzvahs if he's einay medaber and einay shemei. It's interesting to note that let's say someone has a child that has the halacha of a shayta. He is a shayta. The child is a shayta, or the child is a deaf mute. So there was a shaila and they're potter for mitzvahs, right? They have the halacha that they're potter for mitzvahs. So the shaila is: are they allowed to be placed into a school or an institution where they would be able to be helped, but they wouldn't be able to get kosher food? And this was a child that was brought to the Chassam Sofer. So the Chassam Sofer said, without a doubt, avada, because you could, if you send these children to a place where they can be helped and they'll become a chuyev in mitzvahs, and right now they're part of the mitzvahs, avada, you should send them even though they can't get kosher food. Like today, that's not a question, but in the days of Chassam Sofer, it might have been a question. But Rav Moshe actually was mach. Because they don't know what's going on. I mean, Baruch Hashem, nowadays we have the ability to bring kosher food in anywhere, so it's much easier. Okay, so let's see what the Gemara says. Weiter. How do you know the right word to describe a person who's medaber ben shemei zacheres and shemei ben medaber is ilan? Where did you get that from? It says ani kecheres lo yeshma. So you see the definition of cheresh is lo yeshma. Uche lo yiftach piv. So you see the definition of ilam is a mute. The word ilam is a shortened version of the following phrase. Ishtakal milula. His words were taken away. So that's what the word ilam was. So by process of elimination, if ilam means someone who cannot speak, then the cheresh would mean somebody who cannot hear. Medaber ben shemeya, shemeya ben medaber schai. Fact Gemara Batanya, we learned otherwise. We learned medaber ben shemeya or shemeya ben medaber is potter. So we have a stira. Is that chayv or is that potter? We're talking about two separate mitzvahs. There's a one mitzvah that you have to be both medaber and shemeya to be mechuyevin. So there's one mitzvah that you'll be mechuyevin unless you're sai ein medaber and sai ein shemeya. It says akoyel chayovim beria. Let's go back to our Mishnah. Akoyel chayovim beria ubesimcha. So we have an extra word now. Not only is everybody mechuyev to be oila regel, they're also mechuyev in the mitzvah of simcha. Chutz mecheresh hamedaber ve'enoi shemeya. Except for a cheresh who's medaber ben shemeya or shemeya ben medaber, shepatim in ariya. They're pater from ariya. The afal pi shepatim in ariya, even though these are pater from being oila regel, chayiv b'simcha, they're still mechuyev in the mitzvah of v'samachta b'chavecha. Yes, she'enu loy shemeya v'loy medaber, or a shoyter a cotton, that's pater af min a simcha. Why? Hoyle Peturin, we call mitzvahs hamuris b'tayr. So now that we know that the cheresh is not potter from Re'iyah because he's potter from kol mitzvahs, so now we're going to need psukim to tell us that a cheresh that's ein shemei ein medaber will be potter, because it's not because of the general rule of Peturim mikol mitzvah shabbatayr. There's also a shayla about the mitzvah of simcha. Is the mitzvah of simcha and yontiv that you have a mitzvah? At least you should be b'simcha at one point, eat basar, you should have or drink wine, so you have to be mekayim the mitzvah of simcha. Or is the mitzvah of simcha that the entire yontiv you have to be b'simcha? So they quoted from a certain gadol, I don't remember from who, that the hardest mitzvah in the Torah to be mekayim is the mitzvah of simcha and yontiv. You know what it means to be happy 7 full days without being depressed, upset, frustrated at any time during Yom Tov? You have all your einiklach everywhere. It's a mess. It's noisy. You can't sleep. There's traffic, and you have to be b'simcha the whole time. It's a little bit of a challenge. Okay. That's right. You also have to make sure that they're happy. That's right. Our mitzvah is to make them happy. That's right. Tanya Namahachi. We learned the Brisa. That's right. Hakoyel chayovim b'riyah. Everyone's mechuyev in riyah. Uve simcha, and in the mitzvah of simcha, chutz mecheresh hamedaber ve'enu shemeya, or shemeya ve'enu medaber, shepturin min hariyah. They're potter from riyah. V'aval pi shepater min hariyah. Even though these people are potter from being oila regel, nevertheless chayiv b'simcha. They're still mechuyev in simcha. Zok Rashi l'smoich b'chag l'chsiv b'samachta b'chagecha. Parminu l'kamon. The simcha is b'shlomim lechalas abosar. So according to Rashi, it's not a 24/7 type of simcha. You have to engage in certain events of simcha throughout Yom Tov, and then you'll be yotze. So you get to also enjoy being miserable a little bit too, because sometimes you want to be miserable for an hour or so. Yes.
That suggests that there's no chiv of simcha after the churban by sheni.
Because you can't eat a shlomim.
That's right.
Here.
if they don't if they're not mechayiv in Riyah, that means that it's because they're not bar das, right?
No,
No.
we don't know yet why they're not mechuyev in Riyah.
Okay.
We don't know the reason. No, it's only if they're sai and shema and sai and medaber, then they're not bardas. But if they're one or the other, they are bardas. So we're going to need to know why they're put.
Because how would one reason apply to one and not the other? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Say that again.
How would one reason apply to one, the Riyah, and not to Simcha or vice versa? Like, how do you split the reason?
Well, Simcha is like any other mitzvah, and someone who's potter from all mitzvahs will be potter from Simcha as well. Riyah, if someone's only one or the other, they're mechuyev in all mitzvahs, so they're mechuyev in Simcha. The reason why they won't be mechuyev in Riyah is we're going to soon see that the Torah tells us by the mitzvah of Riyah why it wouldn't apply to a person who cannot speak or cannot hear. So David's asking that after the second B'Shem we can't have Shlom anymore. Maybe there's no more Chiv Simcha. But the problem that would make it unfair, because I think it says for a man in Simcha al Davas V'Yayin, but for a woman it's Malbushim Noyim and jewelry. So it's not fair. They could have Simcha and we're stuck. I'm sorry. What type of what? Okay, I take it back. Now I'm recording. Yafinla, you got to pay your fare. But fair, F-A-R-E, could also refer to food. Oh, that's what you meant. Oh, I thought I meant fair, you got to pay your way to keep your wife happy. So there's three fairs we're talking about. Okay. The potter will be in Simcha de Machayev. Very soon the Gemara is going to ask exactly the question that Duvi asked, is what's the difference? Okay, Zok to Gemara Vakim. Zok to Gemara Vakim. Fact, when Maishnal in your read of Tiri, Umaishna in Simcha de Machayev, exactly Duvi's Kasha. Zok to Gemara in your Riyah, Lagabi the mitzvah of Riyah, Gomar Riyah, Riyah Mihakel. We learned the word Riyah that it says by Riyah, and the word Riyah that it says when the Torah is discussing the mitzvah of Hakel. The Chsiv Rashi says the Parshas Hakel. It says B'voi Kol Yisrael Leira'os. So it mentions the word Riyah in conjunction with the mitzvah of Hakel. With Parshas Hakel Hamelech HaYikayra Mishnah Torah Ba'azara B'chol Motzai Shemitah. Every year 8, which was the year after the Shemitah year, the Melech in the Azara would read Mishnah Torah. The Chsiv Mikei Sheva Shanim. So now we know there's a link between Re'iyah, every Yom Tov, and Hakel. And by Hakel it says, the Chsiv Hakel is Ha'anoshim V'Ataf. Uchsiv B'voi Chol Yisrael Le'ra'os. So that's how we know there's a connection between Re'iyah and Hakel. The Hasem and by Hakel we know alone. How do we know by Hakel if someone is Einei Shemeya or Einei Medaber? How do we know that he's not mechuyev in Hakel? It says in the pasuk by Hakel. Let's see if you can look at the pasuk inside. It says Hakel esa'am ha'anoshim v'anoshim v'ataf v'gerch asher b'sharecha l'man yishmu u'leman yilmadu. So they should hear and they should learn. Yilmadu means to learn, not to teach, but that's going to be discussed shortly. Man yishmu u'leman yilmadu. So they should hear and they should learn. If it's referring to everybody there, the purpose of Hakel and those who are mechuyev in Hakel are only people who could do Yishmu and who could do Yilmadu. Which none that we learned. What does Leman Yishmu mean? Leman Yishmu means Prat Lemedaber Ve'eino Shemea. Even if someone can speak but he can't hear, he cannot be Mekayim the Leman Yishmu. And therefore he's potter from Hakel, and because of the Gzer Shava of Riyah, he's also potter from Bigal Red. Leman Yilmadu is Prat L'Shemea Ve'eino Medaber. Man Yilmadu is telling us that someone who can hear but he cannot speak, such a person is also potter from Hakel and therefore potter from Riyah as well. So what you're telling me is Laman Yilmadu means he should be able to learn, and you're saying that someone who cannot speak cannot learn. So you're saying that someone who cannot speak cannot learn. I'm going to prove to you that even though someone cannot speak, as long as he could hear, he is still able to learn. Because Vahani Trey Ilmi, the Havi B'Shivavusa de Rebbe, they were two Elames that were in the environs of Rebbe, B'nei Barte de Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgada, the nephews of Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgada, Amrila, and there are those who say it's B'nei Achse to Rabbi Yochanan. It's the nephew is not from his sister but from his brother. And the Chol Amos, Tava Ayel Rebbe Lebei Midrasha, whenever Rebbe came to say Shir, Hava Aylu v'Yasvikamayu. First of all, they were makbid right away to sit in the front. And I don't think it's because they were reading lips. Umenaidi b'Reishayu. If anyone ever saw Pesach Chase by the Rav Shabbos HaGadol Drasha, or by the Rav Shabbos Shuvah Drasha, you see like he's into it. Like, you know, he's following along. And everybody else has like these glassy eyes, but he's there into it. So that's what they were doing. So you saw very clearly that they were into it. Umaractions fasayu. Like they make a comment that's loud enough for people to hear, but not loud enough to officially be hacking. So that's what they do. That's what they were doing. So you see clearly that they were very much with the program. Uboy Rebbe Rachmi Alayu ve'itzu. And then after Rebbe saw that, he davened for these people and they got healed. But Lamaise, after they were healed and they were able to speak, we finally were able to find out what's going on inside their minds. Vishtakach, we found out, they know everything. So clearly, someone who cannot speak for sure could learn. So, how do you see from Lamani Yilmadu that the person has to be able to speak? So let's just take a quick break for a second. Who were these two people, the Trei Ilmi? So I believe the Ben Yehoyada says that the Trei Ilmi were Eldad and Medad. And Ilmi is sort of a combination of Eldad and Medad. That's what the word Ilmi could be. And it's brought down that they maybe spoke too much. B'shas Moshe Rabbeinu, they I guess in their Gilgal here, as these Trei Ilmi, they came back without the ability to be able to speak, to be misakin what they did way back when. I'm not sure if I heard right or not that Rebbe was a Gilgal of Moshe Rabbeinu. I'm not sure if I heard that correctly or not when I was listening, but I know for sure I heard that these two Ilmei were Eldad and Medad.
They were Nevi'im, Eldad and Medad. They were, it says...
But maybe it was in front of Moshe. They weren't supposed to write. Yeshua said, "I don't need Moshe Kloim." So there was an issue over there.
Right, but it sounded to me like it was a spontaneous nevuah that they were expressing.
But they hurt the covet of Moshe Rabbeinu.
He didn't. He wasn't hurt. Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't hurt. He says, "Halavai, everybody should be a navi." That was his response.
Yeah, that's how most Rabbanim who are true Anovim respond. But it doesn't change the fact that there was a slight to Moshe Rabbeinu's covet. So you're saying it's nevuah, it happened spontaneously. How could they be punished for it, so to speak? Right. Well, I guess on their madrega they came back. They had a tikkun, but Lamatzah they got healed. I don't know much kloim. I hear.
If their punishment was to come back as a dealing, how would he have the ability to reverse that?
I guess once they had their tikkun, it was good. I don't know.
They should be nifter.
I hear. Okay, so I'm a Mar Zutra. So Mar Zutra said, "You're right. Laman Yilmadu cannot exclude someone who can't speak, because someone could learn just fine, even though someone cannot speak. Karibay Laman Yilamedu. So let's make believe that it doesn't say Laman Yilmadu, it says Yilamedu, so that they could teach. Now, anyone who cannot speak would have a very hard time teaching. Rav Ashi said, I don't even need that raya. Vadai Laman Yilmadu, Yaman Yilamedu. The pasuk has to mean Yaman Yilamedu, not Yaman Yilmadu. Forget your kasha. You had a beautiful kasha, and you proved that two Elaims were able to understand. But even without that, just focusing on the words of the pasuk, independent of anything around it, would indicate that Laman Yilmadu, the pasuk must mean Yilamedu, that they should be able to teach. Why is that? The Solkadaita, Laman Yilmadu, if you would want to learn the pasuk as it's written, Laman Yilmadu, they should learn, then you're going to have to say that the chivin d'loy mishtoi loy gomer. You're going to have to subscribe to the position that someone who cannot speak cannot learn properly. right? That's the only way you can use Laman Yilmadu to say that someone who cannot speak cannot learn and therefore is potter from Hakel. The Chivin de Loishama, you're also going to have to say that what's the reason why someone who cannot hear, why is he potter from Hakel? The Chivin de Loishama legamar. What's the reason why someone who could not hear, Laman Yishmu, why is he potter from Hakel? Because he also cannot learn. So, Frank the Gemara, if that's the case, once you learn that somebody who cannot hear and because of that he cannot learn is potter from Hakel, so then anybody whose learning is inhibited for whatever reason, even if it's because he cannot speak, that should also potter him from Hakel. So why do I need Bechlal to say Laman Yilmadu? I already know someone whose learning is inhibited will not be mechuyev in the mitzvah. Elavadai Laman Yilameduhu. So therefore, the pasuk must mean with Laman Yilmadu Yilamedu, the person will teach, and someone who cannot speak cannot teach. But surely someone who could not speak could learn quite a bit. Okay, let's stop over here.
Why would you need a pasuk
don't
to
think
tell
it's
you that?
far
How
ahead.
can someone who cannot speak teach?
What's that?
Why would you need a pasuk to teach us that? Someone who can't speak obviously can't teach.
That's right. Laman Yilamedu tells you that in order to be mechuyev in Hakel, you have to be able to teach. Who said you need to be able to teach to come to Hakel? Laman Yilamedu is what's telling you that. I know a lot of people, I had a lot of teachers that knew how to speak, knew how to hear, and they still didn't know how to teach. But that's an old problem.